Welcome to the Nourished with PCOS podcast. I'm your host, Sam Abbott, registered dietitian nutritionist and PCOS nutrition expert. I'm here to help you learn how to manage PCOS and support your hormones while also having a healthy relationship with food in your body. You can improve PCOS symptoms and labs without dieting. Get ready to feel better with PCOS and leave diet culture in the rearview mirror. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so happy that you're tuning in today. This episode is going to be fun. It's going to be a little bit of an updated take on how to practice intuitive eating with PCOS. So one thing about diet culture is that it's always changing. There's always going to be something that is the newest and the best thing. And I wanted to do a little bit of a revamped episode about intuitive eating because when I started this podcast, I feel like body positivity and kind of moving away from dieting and even practicing intuitive eating, that all was really rising in popularity. And in this current moment, several years later, as I'm recording this episode, I feel like now as a society, we are kind of trending in the opposite direction. I'm seeing a lot more weight loss talk on social media. I know some of my favorite social media accounts that I used to recommend to clients have now turned into weight loss accounts. And I know this can be really hard to see and hear if you are somebody that has a history of an eating disorder and you know that focusing on weight loss doesn't serve you very well, or you're really trying not to get sucked into that diet mentality. You want to work on body acceptance, weight neutrality, all of those things. And the thing about non-diet work for me as a professional and a dietitian is that your weight and your body are never going to be a trend to me. Advocating for accessible healthcare without weight bias is not a trend either. So for me, as a certified intuitive eating counselor, I'm going to be here for you, providing support and resources no matter what is trending. I also thought it would be helpful if when I'm talking about this, I kind of give you some comparisons of intuitive eating versus diet culture to kind of really help you wrap your head around the differences. So before we jump into some tips I have for you, I'm actually going to go through 5. I wanted to just do a brief overview of what intuitive eating is. If you scroll through all of my episodes, you'll see I have quite a few. I have a series about intuitive eating, but just in a nutshell, intuitive eating is a weight-neutral, evidence-based framework that was developed by 2 dietitians, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch, and the purpose of intuitive eating is to help you rebuild trust with your body and to make food choices based on internal cues like hunger, fullness, satisfaction, and your overall well-being instead of using external rules or restriction. So, what makes intuitive eating unique is that it is a weight-neutral framework. The purpose of it isn't weight loss. We don't really know what's going to happen with your weight when you're an intuitive eater. Some people gain weight, some people lose weight, and some people's weight stay the same. If you see somebody sharing a story where they're sharing about how intuitive eating helped them lose weight, just keep in mind that is not part of intuitive eating. So it's not about controlling your weight. It's more about creating a healthier relationship with your food, body, and mind. It helps people move away from chronic dieting, food guilt, and body shame, and it helps people move towards eating in a way that feels both nourishing and flexible. So why is this important? It's important because we see in long-term research that dieting doesn't really work for most people. Most people who diet, and again, when I say diet, that is eating in an effort to lose weight. Most people who diet will usually gain that weight back. But also they will experience worse health outcomes. We see specifically for PCOS, not specifically in the PCOS population, but just in thinking about issues that overlap with PCOS. Long-term, yo-yo dieting leads to worsening insulin resistance, worsening inflammation, worsening cardiovascular factors, and many other health outcomes like poor body image, anxiety around food, like those types of things. And this is really important for people with PCOS because you're probably told, restrict carbohydrates, you need to lose weight in order to manage symptoms. But these types of recommendations oftentimes usually increase stress around food, can disrupt hormone balance. We, know that insulin is a hormone, and can lead to worsening disordered eating, which we also see that in PCOS, that people with PCOS are more likely to have an eating disorder, especially binge eating. So intuitive eating offers a more sustainable and compassionate alternative that can support your health without stressing about food. So online, I often hear people who don't really understand intuitive eating saying two common things. One is, well, if I ate intuitively, all I would be eating all day is pizza, or all I would be eating all day is cupcakes. And then the second thing that I hear a lot is, well, I have PCOS and I have insulin resistance, so there's no way I could even eat intuitively because I'm hungry all the time. And both of these statements really illustrate some of the misconceptions about intuitive eating that I think will be cleared up for you after listening to today's episode. Because intuitive eating is not only about listening to your body. That's not the only thing that's guiding your food decisions. I like to think of intuitive eating as giving yourself permission to turn inward, to really reflect on how your body's feeling. So turning inward to understand your body better, and then blending that internal knowledge with PCOS nutrition recommendations so that you can make food choices that will best fit you and your lifestyle and what your body and your hormones need. So before we jump into how to practice intuitive eating with PCOS, I just thought it would be helpful to go through the 10 principles in the book. So there is actually an intuitive eating book that was written by Evelyn and Elise that you can purchase or check out from the library, and it really goes through these 10 principles in depth. I'm just going to skim through them. The first principle is to reject the diet mentality. And what that means is to just let go of the belief that there is a perfect diet that is going to fix everything and bring you to your dream or ideal weight. Principle number 2 is to honor your hunger. So really get to know and trust and respond to your hunger cues. The third principle is to make peace with food. Allow all foods without guilt. Food has no morality, so you're not good or bad if you make certain food choices. Principle number 4 is to challenge the food police. The food police is just that little voice inside of your head that's telling you that you're good or bad based off of what you eat. Number 5 is discover the satisfaction factor, because enjoying food is a really important part of eating. This is something that usually diet culture often ignores. Principle number 6 is feel your fullness. So really getting to know your body and when you are physically full and being able to stop when you're full most of the time without overeating. A lot of people confuse physical fullness with satisfaction. So satisfaction is principle number 5, fullness is principle number 6. These are actually 2 different things. Fullness is a physical feeling and satisfaction is more emotional and is about enjoying food. Principle number 7 is cope with emotions with kindness. So this principle really addresses emotional eating and really addressing this using compassionate strategies. I think a lot of people feel really guilty when they eat emotionally, and it's okay to eat emotionally. But this principle is all about evaluating the tools in your toolbox for how you deal with emotions. Principle number 8 is respect your body. And this is all about treating your body with dignity and care as it is. I mean, so many people approach caring for their body as something that's in the distance, like when they reach certain goals, when in reality, your current body, your here and now body deserves to be cared for. Principle number 9 is all about movement and intuitive movement and moving in ways that feel good and tolerable and sustainable rather than using movement as a source of punishment or moving your body out of guilt or shame. And then lastly, the 10th principle is to honor your health with gentle nutrition. So gentle nutrition is just supporting yourself with nutrition and focusing on nutrition from a place of abundance and self-care rather than restriction. So those are the 10 principles, and just don't forget that these principles themselves in the intuitive eating book are not specific to medical conditions. And I think sometimes that's where people struggle when they're trying to be an intuitive eater with PCOS, because with PCOS, we need to take all of those principles and then blend them with nutrition principles that can be helpful for managing insulin resistance and inflammation and PCOS in general. So this podcast episode is going to be a great start for you if you feel like that's confusing to blend the two together. Okay, so that was just a brief overview of what intuitive eating is, and I'm going to get you started with 5 tips or beliefs that can be really helpful if you want to practice intuitive eating with PCOS. So the first tip is that there needs to be a mindset shift. And this mindset shift is basically leaving diet culture and moving towards curiosity. So from expectation to curiosity. Diet culture really comes from a place of being rigid. Maybe there are food rules, what to eat, what to avoid, when to eat, is this bad, how much of this should I be eating? It can be very black and white when in reality, nutrition is so nuanced. I mean, whenever I receive any sort of nutrition question from a client or in any of my groups, my first response is to ask more questions or to say it depends, because it does depend on you and your food preferences and what's going on with you and so many different things. There's a really big gray area when it comes to what's right for each person when it comes to nutrition. So with intuitive eating really invites you to get curious instead. A lot of the questions people ask me, they have the answer within themselves, just nobody has really given them the space to trust themselves or to have that sort of self-reflection. So how do different foods feel in your body? If you have insulin resistance, how do different foods impact your hunger levels and for how long? What does fullness feel like for you? And does this change depending on what you're eating and when you're eating? What does satisfaction feel like for you? These are all questions that can come up when you're being curious with yourself. It's less about the comparison of what you think you should be doing or what should be happening. That's a lot of where diet culture comes from. And intuitive eating is more about tuning in to how you're feeling and trying to build connections and associations with how you're feeling and the food choices that you're making. So that is tip number 1. Number 2 is really acknowledging and coming to terms with the fact that dieting does not work long-term for most people. Many people with PCOS have a really long history with dieting. I mean, most people are diagnosed and they're immediately told to try to lose weight, eat less, watch your calories, cut out a bunch of different foods, and it can really impact the way that you approach foods. But for many, many people with PCOS, it ends the same way. Either you can't lose weight at all, or you lose weight and then gain it back, and then you feel like you have failed. But the reality is you did not fail. Dieting is not sustainable for most people. And you can trust your own experience. And actually, in the science world, when we look at the definition of what is evidence-based, we can use our clients' experiences as part of that. So just thinking, what if the problem wasn't you, but really the problem is the unrealistic expectation of dieting itself? An important caveat here where I think, again, people really struggle with the idea of not dieting or intuitive eating is just because you are acknowledging that dieting does not work long-term for most people, that does not mean that you are never going to be tempted to diet again, or you're never going to have these thoughts. It doesn't mean that you're always going to love your body or that you're never going to wish that you were smaller. That's not what this means at all. It just means that when you do have these types of thoughts, you're able to do a little bit more self-reflection on why those thoughts are popping up, because they don't pop up from thin air. We're not just like existing in isolation and we think that we need to lose weight for our health or to feel better. Like, these are thoughts that are kind of taught to us. So really understanding where those thoughts are coming from. And also, if you have more of an intuitive eating mindset, when these thoughts do pop up, you're able to regroup a little better. You're not going to go down some sort of diet spiral. You're going to be able to focus on the things that you can control and just know that no matter how you're feeling, your current body still deserves respect and kindness and compassion. So tip number 2 was acknowledging that diets don't work long term. All right, tip number 3 is really having a good grasp on what health means to you as an individual. So if you are somebody who says, well, I need to diet for my health, or I want to lose weight for my health, my question for you is always going to be, well, when you say health, what does health mean to you? How do you define being healthy? And, is this realistic? And is this really encompassing everything that health really does mean to you? because health is so much more than a number on the scale or an absence of disease or any medical condition. Health includes mental health, it includes emotional health, sleep, what we can do with our bodies, lab values, even your community and social life are part of health. In fact, we know that having strong social connections that's one of the top indicators of longevity or how long you're going to live. So a holistic view of health really honors you as a whole person. It's not just about that physical aspect of health. You would be amazed at how thinking about health in a more holistic way can really impact your food and lifestyle choices. Not only does it ease a lot of the pressure to be quote unquote perfect, but it also does really help you approach taking care of yourself and nutrition and body movement and lifestyle in general from a place of self-care and empowerment rather than a place of guilt and shame. Principle number 4 tip number 4 for helping you practice intuitive eating is to really focus on adding foods rather than taking them away. It is a very diety or diet culture way to approach food by thinking, what am I not allowed to eat? Am I having too much of this? Why did I have that dessert? What do I need to cut out? Instead of asking these types of questions, ask what you can add. Can you add more protein to breakfast? Can you add a snack that's filling and satisfying? Where are there gaps in your nutrition where instead of thinking like, oh, I need to remove this item, you're thinking, I need to add this instead? I've worked with a lot of clients with PCOS individually, and this is something that people really struggle with. They want to bring up all of the negative things that they feel like they're doing, and they're kind of losing sight at focusing on the actual changes they want to make because they are so focused on the things they feel like they shouldn't be doing, but they're doing anyway. And diet culture really teaches coming from that restrictive place. However, healing starts with nourishment, and addition is so empowering and it's more sustainable. So focusing on adding things is a really great place to start. And then my last tip is to be realistic with yourself and focus on sustainability, building on your habits. You do not need a perfect, rigid plan. You need habits that actually work for your life. The idea of willpower is so overrated and is often unrealistic and just kind of sets yourself up for failure. If a habit requires constant willpower, it's probably not right for your body or your routine, at least where you are right now at this moment in time. So instead, look for small changes, maybe even just 1 or 2 at a time that feel really supportive and not stressful. If something isn't working, like it feels chaotic or you don't feel great doing it, just get really curious about why that is. And a lot of times, again, it goes back to not being a realistic behavior change for you in this moment in time. So again, just really reflecting and using your body to gain information. Well, I hope that this was helpful and that it gave you a clearer picture of what intuitive eating can actually look like, especially if you've felt really stuck between wanting to support your body, but not wanting to fall back into the diet cycle, not wanting to trigger like old food fears. I find that when people start to try to practice intuitive eating, their first step is to just throw out every single food rule or diet thought that they ever had and just kind of have a little bit of, I'm going to eat everything whenever I want, which that can definitely be a part of intuitive eating. But I think without having any sort of thought process or structure around that, that's where people can quickly feel like intuitive eating won't work for them with PCOS. So I hope these tips can show you a different way to approach eating intuitively. Just remember, you don't have to follow rules or be quote unquote perfect to take care of yourself. It's okay to start small. It's okay to be curious, and you absolutely deserve support and a nutrition approach that respects and trusts your lived experience. So if this episode really resonated with you, I do have a free intuitive eating workbook that walks you through each of the 10 principles as they directly relate to PCOS. So I've kind of gone in and added how you would approach each principle if you do have those PCOS hormone imbalances. So if you want to grab that, it is completely free. You can find that on my website, PCOSnutritionco.com/workbook. All right, well, thank you for tuning in today, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Nourished with PCOS podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe so you can catch new episodes. I'd also be so grateful if you left a review and rating for the pod as well. See you next Wednesday.